Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at MSI's MAG Coreliquid 280R. Is it worth it? Keep watching to find out. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at MSI's MAG Coreliquid 280R. Now, first of all, I'm going to say this now to avoid all the comments that inevitably we are going to get. This is not made by the same OEM that makes the 240 and the 360 version of this particular unit, which, if you haven't heard already, there was a issue where some of them actually were clogging up with sediment, etc. And there was a recall, and also they were giving away kind of free upgraded versions. The new version, if you are looking at the 240 or the 360, is the V2 versions, so keep looking out for those. But this one, the 280R, does appear to be made by a different manufacturer or went through a different assembly process and has not been affected by that issue in the slightest. So with that out of the way, hopefully we won't be getting comments about that in the comment section below. But feel free to comment if you wish to. This has got some pretty cool features. It's got a built-in pump, which is not in the usual place. So the pump is actually in the radiator itself, which we'll take a look at later. Also, you've got a rotatable pump head, or cold plate head, I suppose it would be now, because the pump is moved. So for your RGB lighting on the head itself, depending how you mount it, you can actually twist it 270 degrees so the MSI logo looks absolutely perfect, no matter what angle you install it on. Also, as you've probably worked out from the title, this is a 280mm radiator. So for some people who don't like the length of the 360s and you've got the ability to fit it, a 280 actually does work out really well. And of course, with 140mm fans, potentially you can spin them at a slower RPM, but still gain an absolute ton of airflow, of which these fans actually do rotate at an RPM between 500 and 1800 RPM and give out in the region of about 85 CFM. When it comes to what processors this will fit, it will fit AM2, AM2+, AM3, AM3+, AM4, AM5 when it's released, and also on the Intel side of things we're looking at LGA 115X, LGA 1200. There is a separate mounting kit for LGA 1700, although this one didn't come with it, and also it has got the option to fit into Threadripper and things like that. So yeah, a pretty broad spectrum of actual sockets and platforms that it will physically fit. So we're going to go through, do a quick unboxing, go through all the features, talk about the packaging, etc, etc. Later on we'll go through and do some temperature tests against a Ryzen 7 5800X, both in standard auto mode and also in a slightly undervolted characteristic, as that is how I actually run my system, so you can get an idea of what that performs like. And I've actually paired it against a approximately similarly priced cooler on the air cooling side of things. So we're pitching this up against the Fortis 5, which is a 140mm tower cooler, which actually does really well and is in the similar sort of price bracket of what this actually cost me. So this at the moment was reduced quite heavily actually on the market at the moment for £50, which I think is actually a really good price point, and the cooler itself is in and around that sort of £50 to £60 mark. If you're going to buy this at the full retail asking price, you're going to be looking at somewhere between £80 and £100 depending where you're shopping. So starting off looking at the packaging, as you can see, that's actually quite nice retail packaging from MSI there, and obviously it supports MSI's Mystic Light. It will support other addressable RGB formats, so if you're on an ASUS board, Gigabyte board, etc, etc, as long as you've got the 3-pin 5V addressable RGB, going to be absolutely good to go. Sadly, this doesn't come with a standalone controller, so you will need some form of addressable RGB header on your board and able to control the lighting. If you don't plug it in, it doesn't just default to Unicorn Puke, it just basically doesn't work at all. So you will need a controller either on the motherboard or a separate add-on. On the back of the box, it talks about some of the key features. So effortless installation without limits. Yeah, probably over-egging things a little bit there. Also, you've got the radiator pump design, which is integrated with actually in the radiator itself, which has its pros and its cons, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Rotatable blockhead, so you can actually turn the blockhead, like I said, 270 degrees to match up with your system. So depending how your processor or your socket is set up, you can just twist the head so the MSI logo stays in the right position. And also you've got high thermal dissipation. So because it's a 280mm rad, obviously you are getting a little bit more extra headroom there for certain processors. If you go onto MSI's site, it does actually give you an idea of what processors this is suitable for. I'll link that in the video description. So with the 240 version, there's a certain kind of limitation. With the 280, obviously you can go a little bit higher. And then if you want to go for the full kind of balls to the wall performance, then the 360 is the one they recommend. But this is in a really nice position for pretty much most processors on the market right now. On the edge of the box, it's got the CPU socket compatibility, as we talked about a little bit earlier on, so you can have a quick look through that. Also talks about the radiator sizes, so I'll leave it on the screen so you can see what that is all about. So let's take a look at the actual unit itself. So as you can see, I've pre-assembled this with the fans actually attached. When you get it out of the box, the fans are separate, but it's really easy to do, just 4 screws in each as you're used to doing. Each one of the fans has individual cabling, so nice and easy to kind of manage if you want to, and they've also got pass-through connectors for the addressable RGB, so if you are limited by a slightly older motherboard which has only got one addressable RGB header, then these will daisy chain, so no issues there. You've also got 4-pin PWM connections for each one of the fans. Like I said, rotational speeds between 500 and 1800 RPMs. The fans themselves, nice looking fans with double ball bearing fans. That is something of a concern in my personal opinion. Now, I actually like my fans to be as silent as they possibly can do. Sadly, with ball bearing type fans, they're not quite as good as the hydraulic bearings for obvious reasons, because with a rotating bearing, you do get that kind of bearing whine. Especially as these are going to get older, that may come into play more so. You are going to get a longer life with a fluid dynamic bearing, which sadly these don't have. What they do have though is a really nice airflow scoop, and also being 140mm, they do generate a little bit more static pressure, especially when at the higher RPMs. Lower RPMs, not quite so much, but they have angled the blades nicely to try and make the best of both worlds. I should say as well, if the fans obviously do fail for any reason, you can, if you want to, you can sort them out for any fans at all. They're not captive in any way, so if you wanted to, you could even upgrade them with maybe some Arctic fans. Those are actually really good choices, especially some of the P-series fans. You may find those beneficial and also potentially quieter. Looking at the top here, this is where the actual pump is. So the pump is actually in the kind of middle of the radiator. Normally we're used to seeing the pump actually in the pump head, or maybe a separate device hanging off the side of the pipes there. I think this is quite nice the way they've integrated it. Initially, I did have my worries that actually having the pump mounted in this top section, if you mount the radiator in the top of your case, which I think probably a lot of people are going to want to do, I was concerned that you may get pump noise, because obviously the pump being at the top, you may get air bubbles going through, but I can actually say no problems with that whatsoever. The only problem I would have is possibly the pump itself is actually a 12-volt pump, so it just runs at a static speed all the time. It isn't controllable, and it rotates at somewhere in the region of about 4,000 RPM. So for some people, especially if you're quite close to it, you may pick up on a little bit of that whine of the pump itself. It's not overly intrusive, and to be honest with you, it's no louder than anything else in the rest of the system, but certainly if you kind of get close up to it, you can hear that it is spinning really, really fast. Looking at the pipes, they've been done really nicely, nice chunky pipes as well, with braiding on there, fabric braiding. I'm not always a big fan of the fabric braiding, because if you're like me, a little bit cack-handed at times, then I do tend to get thermal paste on my fingers, and I touch the pipes and then it kind of stains on there. So yeah, that is what it is. Not really much else you can do, but they certainly do look quite nice. Relatively good flex on them, so no real issues there, depending how you're going to mount your pump head, whether it's going to be twisted or whatever it's going to be. You have got a degree of flexibility actually on the pump itself. As you can see, the pipes do twist pretty decently. So that takes us down to the cold plate head itself. So as you can see, there is the MSI logo on there, which again, you can rotate this 270 degrees, so you can match up the actual MSI logo however you want to in your system. That is actually powered by a 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB connection. Again, daisy chain, so if you haven't got many connectors, it isn't a problem. Pretty long cable on there as well, so that'll reach most places. Then you can daisy chain it with the fans, etc, etc. Nice and easy to do, and because it's round, doesn't take up a great deal of room, so it's not going to interfere with things like your VRM coolers and any other things which are actually around that area. The base is a circular base, as you can see, and it's been finished really nicely, very smooth, quite well polished. This one's a little bit dirty because I've actually installed this and been testing it, so just to get an idea of what it's actually like. But yeah, all pretty good, like it a lot. There's really not a great deal they can do wrong in this particular area, to be honest with you. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of all the fixings. Now, I'll be honest, if you're going down the Intel route, there's actually quite a lot. So this is the Intel setup here. So we've got an Intel backplate, which is to go on the back of the motherboard. You've then got plastic spacers. You've also got the bars that go up through. You'll probably be seeing some of this from B-roll, which I assembled a little bit earlier on. Plastic washers to hold everything in place. This is the kind of ingenious bit. So this clip actually just goes through the actual pump itself and just slots in through. Again, you're probably seeing some B-roll of that. And then you just screw it down. So you've got the 4 thumb screws there with springs on there, so it keeps the tension really nice. If you're going down the AMD route, things are considerably easier, so you can basically ditch all of that there. All you're going to need from this section is 2 of these thumb screws, and it comes with this AMD mounting bracket. So all you do is put those through there. This is very similar if you've ever used a Corsair AIO. It's that sort of clip fit in, it just works very easily. Quite easy to do, again, very little hardware actually needed. So that just clamps down over your standard motherboard brackets, which are included. And again, same deal, just slots on there. So yeah, very easy to do. There is also included a splitter as well. So if you've only got one header on your motherboard for your CPU fan, rather than having two, you can just put both of these fans connected into this, then a single one into your CPU fan header. So that's all well and good. If for some reason your motherboard doesn't have a pump header for actually connecting up the pump itself, then they do include a Molex to PWM style connector. Again, it is just a 12 volt pump, so it just runs pretty much flat out all the time, so it doesn't need any special control. Literally, Molex 12 volt connection will power it very easily. Also included, there are some LGA 2011 bits there. I'm not too sure if anybody actually kind of used that, whether it's really relevant now, but I guess it's nice that they've actually included it should you want to use it. They also include a instruction guide, which actually is pretty minimalist, but goes through and tells you pretty much everything very easily. And even though it's just a simple fold out, actually very easy to kind of grasp what is going on and how to fit things in. So yeah, very good there. Also comes included with a small syringe of thermal compound. I'm not entirely sure what the compound is in there. I've actually opted not to use this, and I've used Arctic MX4, being that is what I was on my cooler previously, so it seemed like a good idea just to try and keep things as level as possible. So there you go, that is all the parts. Best thing to do now is to take a look at the results and see if it's actually any good. So looking at the test system, so this is a MSI B550 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi running with a Ryzen 7 5800X. Two versions of which I've done, so one is with it slightly undervolted, and one is with just everything set to automatic, which may be more beneficial to those of you that are watching. When it comes to the fan curve setup, so I've done what I pretty much usually do. So we're looking at 40 degrees Celsius, there's going to be 40% fan speeds. When it comes to 60 degrees, then it's going to be 60% fan speeds, and then at 70 degrees Celsius, it ramps up to 100%. So yeah, that is the standard curve that I use for all of my testing. So it means I can get pretty accurate results across the board and see where things are going well and where things actually aren't. So I've run a Cinebench test and also just left the system idle. So just left it to be for 5 minutes idle, then 5 minute stress test. That generally finds to get the kind of the temperatures up to equilibrium. I could run it much longer, but I think 5 minutes is pretty much what most people are going to do. So anyway, let's take a look at the results. So first of all, starting off with the Fortis 5, we've got the stock configuration, which was 38 degrees Celsius low and 84 Celsius high. Room temperature is 25 degrees for those wondering. And the Cinebench score was 15288. With it undervolted, we got a little bit of a drop there, so 33 degrees was the low, 74 degrees was the high, and a Cinebench score of 14820. When it comes to the Coreliquid 280R, we're down to 32 degrees Celsius as the low and 78 degrees Celsius as the high, and we have a Cinebench score of 15338. And with it slightly undervolted, we get the same 32 degrees Celsius as the low point, but we do drop down to 60 degrees Celsius at the high point, and a Cinebench score of 14960. So overall, done very well and pretty much performed as I'd expect. 280mm rads generally tend to be a very nice sweet spot in terms of generally pricing, availability, because they don't fit all cases, which is something which we really should mention. That is the kind of elephant in the room. There aren't a great deal of cases which will actually conveniently fit a 280mm radiator in them. Even the case that I was using, which is the Forge 100R from MSI again, really isn't designed to fit it, and I did struggle. I had to remove the rear fan in order to actually get it to fit, and I had it with the pipes at the back of the case, as you've probably seen from some of the B-roll. It was a real struggle to fit it in that case. So certainly I would definitely look at your case, make sure that it's going to be compatible. Nice thing about this is the radiator is quite slimline, and the fans and the radiator together, you're looking somewhere in the region of about 50mm I would give, to see if you've got enough headroom there. Obviously, in terms of length, make sure you haven't got things such as USB cables or anything else in the way, which I certainly had. USB Type 3 on the front panel was kind of butting right up against it, so it was a little bit of a struggle to get in there. And certainly if I had to do any work on any of the fan headers or the power supply, the EPS connector in the top corner, I would probably have to remove the radiator to get to it easily. So yeah, 280s do struggle in that regard because of their width. And if you can fit them, it's generally a rarity, which is probably one of the reasons why this has worked out to be so cheap. They're just trying to clear them. Obviously, MSI have had some bad press recently with the failure rate of the 240s and the 360s. Like I said earlier in the video, if you haven't seen it or you missed it or skipped past it, the 280 is apparently made in a different process or by a different OEM, so is not part of that recall in any way, shape or form. That is specifically for the 240 and the 360 models, so you've got no issues there. It does come with a 1-year warranty. If you buy it on Amazon, they do actually flag up. You can actually purchase an additional year's warranty for somewhere in the region of about £4, which some of you may find a little bit of benefit from. I actually personally did, so just in case, you never know, these things could crop up later and something could go wrong. I think for £54 all in, or just under, I think it's actually pretty decent value for money. Performs pretty well, does as well, if not better, than pretty much most of the air tower coolers on the market, especially those like the Fortis 5, which we've used in this review, and also things like the Noctua D15, etc. It is going to give you a slightly upper edge with that extra thermal capacity. So there you go, there has been the MSI MAG Coreliquid 280R. Genuinely, I've been quite impressed with it. It's done better than I thought. The fans themselves, a little bit on the noisy side due to those roller bearings in there, or the ball bearings. Really could have done with some fluid dynamic bearings in there to make it ultra quiet. The pump itself, yeah, you certainly are going to notice that because it is spinning very fast and it is at a constant speed, but certainly not a great deal noisier than some of the other pumps on the market. So anyway, let me know what you think about this one in the comments section below. Is it something that you would trust now that MSI have had those issues? Even though it isn't part of the recall, does it still give you that thing in the back of your mind that it's part of that same group? So it kind of, could it go wrong at some point? I guess that's something that we all have to take into consideration. But I think for around about £50, if you can get it on offer, like I did, I think it's actually really worth a gamble. So anyway, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.